for a lot of young faculty in particular, the question of how you balance your belief in classical liberal ideas with your teaching activities is a tough question. How open should you be about your classical liberal ideas? What role do they play in the classroom? How should you as a faculty member, sort of say to students what you believe? How should all those things work together? And how do we integrate our beliefs about classical libertarian ideas into our teaching? And so what I want to do is say a little bit about that topic and really two elements of it. The first part is how do we integrate classical liberal ideas into the classroom without being obnoxious or overbearing or trying to indoctrinate our students. So that's one challenge that I think faculty face. The other challenge that faculty face is how to sort of survive as a classical liberal academic in a world of faculty colleagues who don't share your views. So the first question is, how do we do this in the classroom? How do we be who we are as classical liberals in the classroom? And the second part is, how do we survive as classical liberals in the rest of the institution? So let me talk a little bit about the classroom first. Let me first sort of talk about what I think the wrong way to do this is. I think the wrong way to do this is to teach the sort of core courses that you're responsible for with all classical liberal readings and all classical liberal topics and sort of turn those courses into recruiting grounds for young classical liberals. I think this is a mistake for a whole bunch of reasons. First and foremost, you have an obligation as a teacher to the rest of your discipline to sort of make sure that students who take the core courses come out of those core courses knowing the ideas that they're supposed to know. So if you're in economics and you teach introductory economics, there's certain things your students have to know. Or if you teach intermediate micro, there's certain things your students have to know. And if you only give them sort of a classical liberal take on those ideas, you're doing them a disservice. You're also doing your colleagues a disservice because you're not properly preparing those students for the courses that will come later. So I think that's a mistake. I also think it's a mistake. Another reason that's a mistake is that then we run the risk of developing a reputation for sort of being ideologues in the classroom, for that all we ever do is to talk about classical liberal ideas and to sort of push this perspective on students. And I think what we end up doing by doing that is doing our students a disservice in another way by making it more difficult for them to become good critical thinkers, for them to be able to compare and contrast different paradigms. It's important to know classical liberal ideas if you want to encourage students to become classical liberals, but they have to know all the ideas in the particular discipline that you're talking about. So one danger here is that we end up turning out students who only know what the ideas that we want to share with them, as opposed to having a real grasp on the discipline. And the end result of this, if you do this in the classroom consistently, you're going to upset your colleagues and your administration, and you're going to wind up not having the kind of leverage and good reputation you might want to have on your campus. So what can you do instead? Well, I think there's a bunch of things that you can do instead. One, it's okay to bring classical liberal readings and topics into your class, but do that in a way that doesn't sort of wipe out, right, all the things that you need to cover. So if you're an economist, say, teaching intermediate micro, use a standard textbook, teach the usual stuff, but maybe save a section at the end perhaps to talk about entrepreneurship and then use some readings from a classical liberal perspective. Or come up with a couple of applied topics like drug legalization that you want students to investigate that would work that way. So I think that's one much better way to do it, is to sort of think in terms of how do I take a piece of those classical liberal ideas and how do I integrate them into the classroom. You can certainly, another way to do it is to find readings for your courses that address classical liberal ideas and maybe even written by classical liberals, but are also well respected in the discipline. And so one good example here, if you're teaching a political philosophy course, use something by Dave Schmidt. No one's going to argue using Dave Schmidt's work in a good course on political philosophy. So that enables you to introduce those ideas, introduce a thinker, while at the same time still doing your duty to the discipline. Another way you can do this is to create writing assignments that ask students to address classical liberal ideas, or ideas that are of interest to classical liberals. And what you're doing then is two things. You're letting students who are interested in classical liberal ideas have the opportunity to explore them by exploring this topic. But at the same time, you're asking students who don't have those ideas, or might even be antithetical to them, to sort of have to explore an issue that classical liberals think is important. So the nature of consent, let's say, or if it's an ethics course in philosophy, there's all kinds of things you could do there. Certainly economics courses and political science courses bring out obvious ones. So there's all different kinds of writing assignments that one could create that allow students that opportunity to explore those ideas. So that's another way to do this. I think a third way is to work with students outside the classroom. Not everything we do as teachers is inside the classroom. So for example, independent studies and honors projects become a way that you can work with a small number of students very intensely and have no problem turning them loose on classical liberal topics if that's what they want to write about. So that's one way to do it. Other ways outside the classroom, you can have a guest speaker series. Bring classical liberal speakers to campus and introduce those ideas to students that way. Reading groups are another terrific one. If you have students who are sort of interested in these ideas or interested in a topic that could be approached from a classical liberal perspective, offer the opportunity to them to engage in a reading group. If you can attract 6, 8, 10, 12 students into that orbit, right, and become involved in something like that on a regular basis, in some ways that's almost more powerful than what you're going to do in the classroom. You've got a small group together, just you and the students, and that's a really powerful learning experience. And then finally, if your campus has a Students for Liberty group or something like that, get involved as a faculty advisor. Right, and that's an opportunity to sort of bring them into this conversation, and you can certainly see that group as the basis, say, for a reading group or some other kind of activity. So all of those, I think, are powerful ways for you to get classical liberal ideas into your teaching, if not into your classroom. The last sort of piece of advice on this, I'd say, is don't be in the closet. Right, you're a professor. It's okay to profess. You can be a classical liberal in the classroom. You can be who you are in the classroom. If for no other reason, if you don't be yourself, you're not going to be as good as you would be otherwise. Part of what being good teachers is that sort of being genuine and sort of coming across to students as somebody who really has this interest and this enthusiasm. If you try to hide who you are, that's not going to work. So do it carefully, do it well. And one of the biggest pieces of advice here, I think, is to only be as radical as you need to be for the task at hand. If you're teaching a particular topic and you want to bring the classical liberal perspective in, focus on that topic. There's no reason to sort of, just because you've opened the door now to sort of talk about everything under the sun, right? Focus on the topic at hand. And again, be only as radical as you need to be. I think it's easier to begin to sort of bring students along if we go step by step rather than, as it were, sort of tossing them into the deep end of the pool. I also think it's really, really important to develop a reputation among students for being fair, particularly with students who disagree with you. So part of the task here, part of the trick here as you introduce these ideas, is to still play fair with all the students in the classroom, to have that reputation of being someone who, if you don't agree with, if the students think they don't agree with you, nonetheless that they will get a fair shake from you. I think that's really important. The last thing you want is to sort of be perceived again as an ideologue. The other thing I'd say is you want to make sure, as important as it is to be fair with non-classical liberal students, you need to be rigorous and challenging with the students who think they agree with you, and you need to come to them and make sure that they are making the best kind of arguments that they can make. So again, I think you can do this. It's not easy. It's hard to separate a good argument from the arguments we agree with, but it's really important to do the best we can, I think, as faculty members, to make sure that we treat all of our students fairly. And the perception that you're treating students fairly will also make them more open to your ideas. So those are a few thoughts on what you can do sort of on the classroom and on the student side of things. What about on the faculty side? How do you survive in a world of colleagues who sort of don't see the world the way you do? Again, you got to be you. Okay, I think you have to be who you are. If you try to be someone you're not, let's say you even successfully do it in the sense as a young faculty member you get tenure, but after tenure you kind of come out of the closet. I think the faculty, your colleagues are going to feel somewhat betrayed and feel that you weren't honest with them about who you really were. And even though now you've got the protection of tenure, that will make for a difficult environment. I think it's much better to just be who you are from the start and be honest and upfront about people. Well, with people about what you believe and who you are. However, to do this means you have to do two important things. One, you have to do excellent work. You have to be an outstanding teacher. You have to be a solid researcher. Whatever your particular institution values more, obviously, you'll have to adjust in those ways. But the more that you have a sort of unimpeachable record, the more that you do outstanding work, the more you can get away with, right? The more open you can be, the more out of the closet you can be, because no one's going to be able to criticize you if you're really doing a good job in the classroom, if you're cranking out the research, doing all those kinds of things. The one thing I'd say there about the research end Make sure, too, that you're not just publishing in classical liberal outlets. Though I think that's important and valuable, you want to also make sure that you're hitting in the regular journals in your field and continue to do so after tenure. So again, you sort of inoculate yourself against the accusation that you only talk about this classical liberal, libertarian stuff all the time. So doing excellent work is really important. I think the other piece is to demonstrate a concern and commitment for the institution. I think this is particularly true at small schools where you'll have all kinds of responsibilities outside the usual stuff, but even at larger schools, you're going to have to do committee work, do it well, do it responsibly. At a small school, get involved with things around campus. Make it clear you care about the future of your department, the future of the institution. If admissions need your help, do it, right? I mean, all these sorts of things both mark you as a good community member and as a good citizen, but again, demonstrate the values of the institution in a way that make it very difficult for people to sort of criticize you when you're more open about what you believe and how that plays out, in the classroom. I think it's also important to find faculty and staff friends who you don't agree with, and to hang out with them and to spend time with them, to just understand how they see the world, and hopefully they begin to understand how you see the world. And just interacting with people at the lunch table or outside the college environment, I think is really important. Being able to talk to them about the things that they're interested in outside your discipline, to be able to talk with them about what's going on campus or the community. All those sorts of things, again, help you establish a sort of, you're a real human being, okay? You have a whole life, you have all these things you can talk about, and you're not just being marked as he's the libertarian on campus, right? That's not what you want. You want to be, he's a good colleague who happens to have these particular views. So I think those are all ways that you can do that. And sort of the bigger picture here is, as my friend Pete Becky likes to say, don't be a lunch tax, right? Don't be someone that people go, I don't want to go to lunch with him, okay? Because you're obnoxious all the time or you're pushing your views in their face all the time. Again, here too, not everything is a graduate seminar, not everything is a political debate on Facebook or the internet, right? You can go out and hang out with your colleagues and go to lunch with them and talk about other stuff. It's okay to laugh at yourself. Self-deprecation earns you social capital. There's all kinds of ways you can do this. I've been eating lunch with the same group of people basically for over 20 years. And we rarely talk politics. Sometimes we do, but that's just a group of people who are my friends, who I get to know, who we talk about teaching, we talk about all kinds of stuff. And I think that having those kinds of relationships and being someone that people want to go to lunch with is really, really valuable. Plus, it's an opportunity to get to sort of be an anthropologist of faculty culture, to get to know your colleagues, to understand how they see the world, and to sort of understand their thought process, which I think is also helpful in understanding the students that they end up producing in their classrooms. And finally, it's an opportunity, and this is a more general piece of advice, to point your faculty colleagues in the direction of the best libertarian work in their field. That's, you start talking about something and say, have you ever read so-and-so's book, or have you ever read this article? It's a way to sort of get them exposed to those ideas in a very less pressured environment, and you're just being a good colleague, suggesting to them something that they might be interested in. I think if you do both of these things, if you're open but careful in the classroom, if you are only as radical as you need to be for the task at hand, and you remember that first and foremost you want to be a good colleague, you want to be someone who cares about the institution, who cares about students, what you'll find is that you can be who you are in the classroom. Students will come to you and students will be interested, and your very passion for libertarian ideas will be part of what makes you a good teacher. And at the same time, if you're also a good colleague, people will respect you as a good teacher, as a good researcher, before they sort of mark you as, oh, he's the libertarian guy. So I think if you do that carefully and in a considered way, you can have a very successful career that combines your love of teaching and your love of classical liberal ideas.